When LeBron passes up Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in points, and he will this year, will that make him the greatest player ever? Okay. An interesting question. I think the greatest player is Michael Jordan.
LeBron doesn't have that gene.
Hold on. You said LeBron James the greatest player ever?
Ever.
What about Michael and Kobe? So you just gonna pass Kobe up like that?
I'm gonna pass Kobe up. I'm gonna look at Michael. I'm gonna look at the.
I knew it. Patron America.
Yo.
Patron America.
Kobe Bryant couldn't fill, or Michael Jordan fill LeBron's shoes. The impact that he's had with different teammates, different organizations.
Would you be mad at me if I just walked off the show?
The air inside Madison Square Garden still carried that cold, late-night tension when everything shifted from a routine loss into something far more explosive, as the Los Angeles Lakers fell 112-100 to the New York Knicks in a game that should have faded quietly into the long NBA season but instead ignited a firestorm, because by the time the final buzzer echoed, clips were already circulating of Shaquille O'Neal confronting LeBron James in the tunnel, a moment that felt less like a disagreement and more like a generational clash unfolding in real time, with Shaq reportedly taking issue not just with one podcast comment but with what he perceived as a broader pattern, an erosion of respect for the era that shaped legends like Michael Jordan, and while LeBron's remarks about the modern game evolving through pace, spacing, and even injury trends like calf strains replacing high ankle sprains may have been grounded in analytics and sports science, to the old guard they sounded like a quiet rewriting of history, a suggestion that today's game demands more without fully acknowledging the physical brutality, hand-checking, and psychological warfare that defined earlier eras, which is why Shaq's reaction carried such weight, because it wasn't just about numbers or rings but about identity, about how greatness is measured and remembered, with Shaq championing a version built on fear, dominance, and the ability to impose will so completely that opponents felt it before tip off, while LeBron's legacy leans on something different: adaptability, longevity, and the capacity to remain elite across decades and changing systems. And this is where the tension sharpens, because both perspectives hold truth yet speak different languages, one rooted in peak intimidation and myth-making presence, the other in sustained excellence and evolution, and when those philosophies collide publicly, especially in a setting as symbolic as a tunnel confrontation after high-profile loss, it transcends the moment itself and becomes part of a larger narrative that influences locker room conversations, fan debates, and ultimately historical framing, turning what could have been dismissed as rumor into a referendum on how the game defines its icons, forcing everyone watching to pick a side not just between players but between ideals. Whether greatness is about making opponents fear you at your peak or outlasting everyone through relentless adaptation, and that is why this incident, whether amplified by media or rooted in genuine emotion, refuses to fade, because it taps into something deeper than a single game or quote. It challenges the very criteria by which basketball immortality is judged, ensuring that long after the score is forgotten, the debate it sparked will continue shaping how this era, and those who defined it, are remembered. LeBron's about to do something that hasn't been done in a long time, and I think he will move his name up there, but for me it's always been Dr. J and Michael Jordan, matching those guys. This is where it gets dangerous for LeBron James. The narrative is no longer only on podcasts or in columnist power rankings. It's in locker rooms and barbershops where legends hand down lore to the next generation. When Shaquille O'Neal publicly suggests the modern star shows up more as an entertainer doing choreographed pre-game routines and courting brand moments, that's a direct hit to credibility among the players who remember getting toughened by the league. Those are the same players who will tell their kids which guys they'd be terrified to guard at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. If the tape in the tunnel shows Shaq confronting LeBron the way the clips suggest, that moment will echo louder with teammates and opponents than any morning after press conference. Now let's look at the stats and historical context, because Shaq invokes history for a reason. He reminds fans that the game used to tolerate a level of physicality that today's rulebook simply forbids. Hand-checking, flagrant fouls with lighter consequences, and a culture that rewarded intimidation are not just nostalgia. They shaped how players practiced, played through pain, and built careers. Shaq's argument is that comparing eras by counting games doesn't account for the daily physical toll that once existed, the kind that made careers shorter but peaks more savage. On the flip side, LeBron's defenders point to his adaptability. He has changed his body, his diet, and his game to thrive as the league changed, compiling longevity few can match. Both sides are right about something. The league is different, and greatness can be measured in more than one way. But Shaq's emotional core is this: if you publicly claim the modern era is the tougher one, you're obliging yourself to honor the men who survived the old one. When I look at LeBron, he's not what Michael was as a player. He's not even what Kobe Bryant was as a player. So when you talk about trying to compare Michael's instinct, his ability to take over games, his ability to want that last shot and demoralize you and scare the living hell out of you, LeBron doesn't have that gene. This is where young players usually make a mistake. They hear the celebrity noise and confuse it for toughness. Shaq's rant, whether in the tunnel or on live TV, is aimed at a culture that prizes branding sometimes more than bone-deep competitiveness. He sees a world where guys can be icons on Instagram and still be labeled the toughest, and he hates the dilution. That's not to say young players today don't train harder, practice smarter, or value their longevity. Of course they do. But the meaningful difference Shaq is railing against is psychological, the dread factor, the late-night phone calls teammates make to say, "Watch out for this guy because he will wreck your soul." In Shaq's lexicon, LeBron's aura, for all his physical gifts and numbers, never produced that same wide-eyed fear. That's the insult that cut through the tunnel and brought everyone to the edge. So what happens next? This escalates beyond ego and into legacy. Shaq calling out LeBron becomes fuel for the old guard versus new guard debate. Do we crown a GOAT based on peak terror and clutch domination, or on unparalleled adaptability and career accumulation? Shaq's position pushes public memory toward the former. LeBron's defenders will double down on the latter. The stakes are Hall of Fame narratives, documentary framing, and history books. If the tunnel incident, viral clips included, convinces a critical mass that LeBron's rhetoric was disrespectful, Shaq's counterpunch will shape future textbooks, not only what LeBron did but how he was perceived by the men who built the league. That's the kind of damage that outlives a single season. Here's the part nobody is talking about: the human cost and the theater of it all. Publicly, LeBron is a global icon with sponsors, influence, and thousands of headlines a year. Privately, walking into a core conversation with Shaq, a man whose Lakers run remains one of the seismic achievements in NBA history, means accepting a history lesson that can be brutal. If you're LeBron and you've been told for years that you reshaped the league and elevated player power, being stopped in a tunnel by Shaq and told that you've disrespected the legends is a moment of existential chill. It's not just about the soundbite. It's about whether the younger star wants to be liked or feared. Shaq's grievances aren't only with LeBron's words. They're with a cultural shift that reorganizes what the league respects. That's why the tunnel incident matters, not because it was violent, but because it publicly symbolized a generational judgment. An interesting question comes out of all this. Who is the greatest player? For many, the answer is still Michael Jordan. Now to the closing bell. What do you want to believe? Do you side with Shaq's visceral muscle and fear definition of greatness, the one where legends made opponents cower and refuse to beg for respect, or do you accept LeBron's differently framed mastery where longevity, adaptation, and cultural leverage define the modern icon? There's no neutral answer here. If you pick Shaq, you argue that dignity, intimidation, and a certain old-school brutality are the only metrics that truly matter. If you pick LeBron, you argue that the game evolved and the players who understand the new map are the ones who should be celebrated. Either way, this tunnel clip just pried open a debate that will decide how this era remembers its titans. So pick a lane and bring receipts. Show the plays where Jordan made opponents miserable, or show the career accumulation that LeBron orchestrated across franchises. Cite the podcast clip where LeBron reframed injuries and then contrast it with Shaq's raw response. Argue with film, not with feelings. Because one thing is certain, this is no longer a sideshow. Shaq's call-out has turned into a generational referendum. The Lakers will play again, stats will be tallied, and history will keep its ledger, but the memory of a tunnel standoff and a legend pulling no punches doesn't fade fast. Which side are you on, Team Fear or Team Mastery? Argue like the Hall of Fame depends on it, because in the court of public opinion, it just might.